Welcome back to the deep dive. We often tackle some pretty intricate topics here.
We definitely do.
But today, we are diving into a theoretical framework that's not just complex, it's incredibly ambitious. It's trying to do something pretty radical.
You can say that again. It's aiming to engineer reality itself in a way,
Exactly. So the focus today is entirely on the double transverse, transjective, quadratic model theory.
which thankfully we can just call DT2. It saves a bit of breath.
Definitely. And look, this isn't just some abstract thought experiment gathering dust on a shelf.
No, not at all. The sources we're looking at frame it as a very practical blueprint. It's designed for community engineering, specifically in a post-colonial context.
Right, for renewal for decentralized organization. And interestingly, it seems to be finding application in places like the Kenema district in Sierra Leone, West Africa.
Yeah, which is described as a really off-grid, remote setting. So it's being tested in a challenging environment.
Which makes unpacking it even more crucial. Our goal today, really, is to give you a shortcut. We want to get past that initial, maybe intimidating jargon.
Things like exopsychoanalytic form, ontological engineering, or flatafrotheopoetics. They can sound a bit daunting at first glance.
For sure, but we want to show you the mechanics behind it, how this theory actually describes and, importantly, maintains what it calls a living flat metabolism.
It's about understanding the functional core beyond the sometimes shocking terminology.
Because the ambition here is just huge. We're talking about designing systems intended to literally alter consciousness.
That's the ontological engineering part. It's a very bold claim.
And it's all conceptually anchored in this idea of the Kenemagorian mansion, which suggests, this isn't just theory. It's presented as a real attempt, a living project, to redefine existence in that specific context.
A concrete effort to build something new on old foundations. Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we probably need to start with the foundational ideas. What does DTTC say it is?
Right. How does it define itself?
Well, the core self-description, as you mentioned, is living flat metabolism.
That phrase alone packs a lot in. Living, flat, metabolism. Each word seems pretty loaded.
They really are. Let's take metabolism first. Choosing that word signals something specific. It's saying this structure isn't static. It's not a fixed ideology or a rigid government plan.
So more like a biological organism.
No.
Always processing, adapting.
Exactly. It has to consume input information resources, challenges, break them down, adapt, regenerate. It has to be living. If it stops that dynamic process, it essentially dies. It loses its relevance or function.
And connecting that to flat, how does the non-hierarchical aspect play into this metabolic flow? Because usually you think of metabolism supporting a single organism, maybe.
Well, think about traditional structures, especially colonial ones or even many modern bureaucracies. They tend to be pyramidal.
Right. Power flows up, resources get concentrated at the top.
Precisely. And DT rejects that. By insisting on a flat metabolism, it mandates that energy, resources, knowledge, they all flow in a distributed way, horizontally.
So every part of the system, every node, every family unit, perhaps, is equally important for the whole thing to function and thrive.
That's the idea. It's fundamental for building resilience, especially in a decentralized community, maybe in a remote area where relying on a distant center just doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. If the capital city holds all the cards, a disruption there paralyzes everything. But a flat metabolism builds resilience right into the local level. Okay, so that's the core identity. Let's get into the philosophical thesis itself. It's structured in two parts, starting with part one, non-autoanthropology, sacramental.
Right, and this starting point is quite radical. It's a very conscious rejection of how Western academic and colonial systems have historically studied and defined other cultures.
Autoanthropology being defining others based on your own assumptions, your own culture as the default.
Exactly. Defining the other primarily in relation to the self, which was usually a Western self. Non-autoanthropology flips that. It refuses that external definition.
So, the framework insists identity comes from within. It's inherent, rooted internally, maybe collectively, not imposed. It stops asking, how do we compare to the colonizers' institutions?
Precisely. It asserts self-definition. It understands the community, identity, reality itself. These aren't things to be measured against some supposedly universal, often colonial standard. But then there's that modifier, sacramental.
Yeah, that really shifts the ground, doesn't it? It takes it beyond sociology or politics.
It absolutely does. Calling the process sacramental implies that the very act of organizing, living within this framework, maybe even resisting external definition, is inherently sacred. It's deeply embedded in a kind of profound, maybe even ritualistic understanding.
So the structure isn't just practical, it's tied to deep beliefs, ancestral values.
Yes, it suggests that the purpose isn't just good governance or economic stability. It's also about spiritual maintenance, about aligning the community with its cosmological understanding. This is vital for what they call neoculturation, creating a new culture.
Because if the new culture isn't seen as sacred, maybe it's easier to abandon or replace.
That could be the thinking. Grounding it this way makes the community structure feel authentic, deeply rooted, and potentially much more resistant to outside pressures or attempts to dilute it.
Okay, so that leads us to where this sacred, self-defined system is actually supposed to exist. Part 2, the dissertation, Kenema Mansion, Maison Palimpsest Manifest.
Right, the Kenema Mansion. This seems to be the name for the conceptual and physical space where this is all applied. It's explicitly linked to the Kenema district in Sierra Leone.
So it's the real-world test site, the crucible for this theory.
Seems so. And it's not just called a mansion, but a maison, which emphasizes the home or house aspect, maybe the domestic lived reality.
And then those two other words, palimpsest and manifest, those are really evocative.
They are. A palimpsest, historically, is parchment that's been written on, scraped clean, and then written over, but traces of the old writing often remain visible underneath.
So, calling the mansion a palimpsest acknowledges that this new post-colonial structure isn't built on a blank slate. It's layered onto existing history, culture, maybe even trauma.
Exactly. You can't just erase the colonial past or the deeper ancestral history. It acknowledges that substrate. The wisdom, the wounds, they're all still there, embedded in the foundations. It's a way of being honest about the inherited complexities.
It avoids that simplistic idea of just starting over completely.
Right. It accepts the historical layers, incorporates them, perhaps transforms their meaning, and then makes the new structure manifest.
Meaning active, visible, clearly demonstrating this new way of being.
Yes. It's showing that the living flat metabolism isn't just an idea. It's active, it's present, it's being consciously built upon that complex history, not in denial of it. It's a structure that, you could say, wears its history openly while building its future.
Okay, so we have the philosophical foundation, this sacred, self-defined system, living and adapting on its inherited historical layers. Now, how does it actually work? What are the mechanics? That brings us to what the theory calls the central operational node.
Right. This is where things get particularly dense, but also really operational. This seems to be the core description of how the system functions, how power and knowledge move.
And the term is, let me get this right, transversal transjective, flat huzo polycentric homeorhythms. That's quite a mouthful.
It really is. But if Section 1 was the soul, you could think of this as the nervous system. It describes the dynamics of this successfully applied decentralized community organization, especially crucial for managing things in a potentially vast, remote area like Kenema.
Okay, let's break it down. First part, transversal transjective. What does that signify?
Transversal suggests movement that cuts across established lines. Think cutting across typical vertical hierarchies or linear paths of communication or control. It ignores old boundaries.
Like ignoring colonial administrative lines, maybe, or even internal status lines.
Could be both. And then transjective. This implies it's not just crossing lines passively, it's actively projecting itself outwards, dynamically. It's asserting its own logic, its own form, into external spaces, or maybe into the future. It's not just reacting, it's shaping.
So it refuses to be contained by existing structures and actively pushes its own model outward. Okay, that's the motion. But the how seems to be in the parentheses.
Yeah.
Flat hizo polycentric homeorhythms. We know flat means non-hierarchical. What about rhizomatic?
Rhizomatic is a concept borrowed partly from botany, think of ginger root or certain grasses, and partly from philosophy, particularly Deleuze and Guattari, unlike a tree with a central trunk and hierarchical branches.
A rhizome spreads underground, horizontally, sending up shoots unpredictably. No single main root.
Exactly. So in a social context, it means knowledge, leadership, innovation that can emerge from anywhere in the network. There's no single authorized center point that dictates growth or action. It's multi-rooted, inherently decentralized.
That sounds like the very definition of grassroots empowerment.
It is. And this structure naturally leads to being polycentric. If growth is rhizomatic, then there can't be just one center of power or focus. There must be multiple centers, potentially many, and they're all, in principle, equally important.
Which, in the Kenema context, would be vital. It stops power just accumulating in, say, the largest town or with one influential family.
Build systemic resilience. If one center faces a challenge, the whole network doesn't collapse because the capacity, the knowledge, the energy is distributed across many points.
Okay, so flat, rhizomatic, polycentric, that describes a very complex, decentralized network. What holds it together? What keeps it from being chaotic? That must be the homeorhythms part.
That seems to be the function, yes. Homeo suggests homeostasis, balance, maybe synchronicity. It implies mechanisms that ensure this diverse, decentralized network operates with a degree of coherence, a shared rhythm or pulse.
So it's not just random nodes doing their own thing entirely disconnected. There's an underlying harmony or coordination.
Something like that. It ensures the flat metabolism keeps flowing smoothly across the whole system. Used a jazz analogy earlier for the central node.
Right, like a skilled jazz ensemble. Multiple players, each a center of creative power, improvising, taking solos, but all listening, responding, staying within a shared harmonic structure, creating something coherent together.
That's a really good way to think about it. The homeorhythms are like that shared musical understanding that allows for both individual expression, polycentric, rhizomatic, and collective harmony, flat metabolism.
So putting it all together, transversal, transjective, highly polycentric homeorhythms describes a community structure that cuts across old lines, projects itself outward, operates without hierarchy, allows power and initiative to spring from anywhere, has multiple centers, and maintains coherence through balanced, synchronous flows.
That's the essence of it. It's the operational definition of DT's ideal decentralized structure in action.
Wow, that is a remarkably sophisticated design for community organization. It makes standard governance models look, well, quite simplistic in comparison. Okay, now, the theory also maps this operation across 4 axes: ultra, extra, meta, and intra. What's the purpose of these?
These axes seem to define the conceptual space or the different dimensions the model operates within and analyzes. It ensures a holistic approach, looking at things from multiple perspectives simultaneously.
So intra sounds like the most internal or local level, personal experience, maybe household organization, immediate community interactions?
Correct. The inner world, the immediate structure. Then moving outwards, you have extra. This would cover the external observable environment.
Like the social dynamics between groups, the local ecology, interactions with neighboring areas, the one river concept we'll probably touch on later.
Exactly. The tangible world outside the immediate internal structure.
Then meta. This sounds like the level of self-reflection, the overarching philosophy.
The system looking at itself, defining its core beliefs, its cosmology, the rules of the game, the sacramental aspect, perhaps? That seems right. It's the level of meaning and identity. And finally, ultra. This sounds like the highest, most expansive level.
The furthest reach. Aspirational goals, the long-term vision, the ultimate purpose, maybe connecting to that premetotopia idea.
Precisely. It's the dimension of ultimate ends and transformative potential. So the model demands that any action, any analysis, considers all 4 levels: the internal, the external, the philosophical, and the aspirational.
But then the theory uses these axes differently in 2 opuses. Opus 1 is described as reverted and Opus 2 as inverted. What's the significance of that split? Reverted versus inverted?
This seems to define the primary direction of focus or energy for each set of principles. Opus 1, being reverted, looks primarily inward and perhaps backward.
Towards foundations, grounding principles, ancestral connections, purifying the internal space, like securing the base first.
That seems to be the idea. It's about establishing the core integrity, the authenticity, drawing strength from roots. It's the necessary work of decolonization and grounding before projection.
And Opus 2, being inverted, looks outward and forward.
Exactly. It takes that secured, grounded foundation and focuses on how to act upon the world, how to project the system's values, how to use language, how to engage with the future, how to actively build the new culture, the neoculturation part.
So Opus 1 builds the engine and fills the tank with the right fuel, and Opus 2 puts the vehicle in drive and steers it towards the horizon.
That's a good analogy. One provides the anchor, the authenticity. The other provides the dynamism, the tools for transformation. Both are essential for the whole living flat metabolism to function and endure.
Okay, let's dive into Opus 1 then, the reverted principles. These are the foundational pillars, the grounding elements for this Kenemagorian mansion. The first one listed is neuroarchitecture.
Right, and this is a fascinating concept. It's not just about, say, eco-friendly building materials or aesthetics. It's much deeper.
It implies that the architecture itself, the design of buildings, spaces, maybe even the layout of the community, is intended to directly influence how people think and relate to each other.
That's exactly it. It's based on the idea that our environment, shapes our cognition, our social patterns, our neurology. So you consciously design the environment to support the desired social structure, in this case, the flat, communal, decentralized structure.
So if traditional power structures often use architecture, like imposing government buildings, palaces with big gates, hierarchical layouts to reinforce authority.
Then neuroarchitecture within DTA would do the opposite. It would design spaces that actively discourage hierarchy and encourage constant lateral communal interaction.
There's a specific phrase mentioned in the outline related to this. Walls are lungs. What does that suggest?
It's a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
Mm.
It suggests that buildings and spaces shouldn't be dead containers or barriers. They should breathe. They should facilitate the flow of life, energy, communication, the metabolism of the community.
So maybe open designs, communal spaces woven into living areas, structures that blend with the environment rather than dominating it, things that force interaction and shared experience.
That seems likely. The goal is to make it architecturally, physically difficult for individual ego or hierarchical power to take root and dominate. It's like engineering humility into the physical structure itself.
That's a profound link between the built environment and the social political goal. Okay, the second principle flows quite naturally from this. Flat geonaturalism.
Yeah. This takes the flat principle beyond just social organization and applies it directly to the community's relationship with the natural world, the geo.
So it combines non-hierarchy, flat,
Yeah.
with geonaturalism, a way of living in tune with the natural environment.
Exactly. It mandates a relationship where human society doesn't see itself as separate from or dominant over nature, but as integrated within it. It avoids that typical hierarchy where humans extract resources from a passive environment.
This sounds like a direct critique of colonial resource exploitation models, plantations, mining, logging, where nature is just stuff to be used, often destructively.
Absolutely. Those models impose a stark hierarchy. External demand dictates extraction. Nature is subservient. Local communities often bear the environmental cost. Flat geonaturalism insists on a mutualistic, balanced relationship. The health of the community and the health of the land are seen as inseparable.
And this connects to that other phrase highlighted for the kenema context, one wee river.
Precisely. That phrase encapsulates it perfectly. The river isn't just a resource for the community. The community and the river are part of one single system. We includes the river. If the river suffers, the community suffers, and vice versa.
In an off-grid remote setting, this isn't just a nice philosophy, is it? It's basic survival.
It's utterly pragmatic. Sustainability isn't an add-on. It's hardwired into the community's operational logic. The decentralized rhizomatic social structure needs a similarly decentralized, respectful engagement with the environment. Many small, integrated interactions, not one big industrial footprint.
Okay, principle 3 touches on education. Radical unschooling within ancestral wisdom. This sounds like a direct challenge to standard educational systems.
It certainly is. The radical unschooling part signals a rejection of conventional institutionalized schooling, especially models inherited from colonial times.
Why? What's the critique there?
The argument often is that those imposed systems serve primarily to disconnect people from their own local knowledge, their history, their environment, and instill dependence on external validation and curricula. They trained people away from self-sufficiency and local relevance.
So if you're learning abstract European history or math problems disconnected from your reality, you're not learning how to thrive in your specific place.
That's the critique. So what replaces it? The second part. Knowledge acquisition is driven by ancestral wisdom. Learning is rooted in inherited, localized, practical knowledge passed down through generations.
So instead of a textbook math lesson, maybe you learn calculation by figuring out sustainable crop rotation cycles for local plants. Or learn history through oral traditions and genealogies.
Exactly. Knowledge is validated by its usefulness within the community, its connection to the culture, its alignment with flat geonaturalism, and the overall homeorhythms of the system. It keeps learning relevant, practical, and deeply integrated.
And it naturally keeps elders and tradition bearers central to the knowledge transmission, reinforcing that sacramental aspect and the flat structure by valuing lived experience over certified expertise.
Precisely. It creates a robust, localized learning ecosystem.
Okay, the fourth and final principle of Opus 1 anchors the whole thing, Mende cosmology.
This is crucial. By explicitly grounding the model in a specific local cosmology that of the Mende people prominent in the kenema region, it makes a powerful statement.
It confirms that this isn't some universal theory being parachuted in.
Exactly. It reinforces the non-autoanthropology principle. He says the fundamental understanding of reality, the ontology itself, is derived from the specific cultural and spiritual framework of that place and people. It's not trying to impose a generic post-colonial model.
So it avoids becoming a new form of intellectual colonization, where even the liberation framework is imported.
That seems to be the intention. It validates the local worldview as the legitimate source of truth and structure for the community. It ensures the neoculturation is genuinely rooted.
So these four principles, neuroarchitecture shaping the mind through space, flat geonaturalism integrating with the land, radical unschooling rooted in ancestral wisdom, and the whole thing grounded in Mende cosmology, they define the internal strength, the integrity, the authentic foundation of the Kenema mansion.
They establish the core identity and the operational base. It's like setting the internal compass, ensuring the system knows itself before it acts outwardly. It formalizes that idea of deep respect for the ground, the ancestors, the need-to-dust philosophy mentioned in the focus points.
All right, so Opus 1 built the solid, authentic foundation. Now, Opus 2 turns outward, the inverted phase. This is about action, projection, building the future. And it starts with language. Etymological hybridization, hyperorganon.
Yes, language is seen as a critical battleground. Colonialism didn't just impose political structures, it imposed languages. And with them, ways of thinking, categories, concepts.
So if you're forced to debate your independence or define your new systems using the colonizers' terms democracy, republic, development, you're still operating within their conceptual universe.
That's the argument. You're limited by the tools they gave you. So etymological hybridization is the conscious, deliberate act of breaking free from that. It involves blending, fusing, merging different linguistic roots, maybe local languages, maybe technical terms, maybe even reappropriated colonial terms, to create new words, new concepts.
Words that carry the specific meaning and values of the DT system itself.
Precisely. Words that are inherently flat, rhizomatic, maybe sacramental. The goal is to build a hyperorganon, a powerful, self-organizing system of meaning that serves the community's own reality.
And this is described as enabling an ontological engineering insurgency. That's a very strong phrase. Language as a weapon to reshape reality.
Yes. By changing the words you use to think and communicate, you literally change the reality you can perceive and build. It's a form of insurgency because it actively resists and subverts the dominant linguistic and therefore ontological order imposed from outside.
Can you give a hypothetical example? You mentioned susocalculus earlier.
Right. Instead of importing a term like governance committee, which brings all sorts of baggage, you might forge a new word, maybe combining a Mende term for weaving together, hinda, with a Creo word for energy, pawa, creating something like hinda pawa. This instantly frames collective decision-making as an act of weaving shared energy, not a bureaucratic procedure. It re-engineers the concept itself.
I see. It's about embedding the philosophy directly into the vocabulary. That act of creation leads into the next point, which sounds very energetic. Joyful, Afro-optimist-oriented accelerationism, JAOA.
Yes, this injects the political drive, the momentum. Now, accelerationism is a term that often carries, let's say, complex and sometimes negative connotations in wider discourse.
Right, often associated with disruption for its own sake, maybe speed leading to instability or even a desire to hasten collapse. How does DT2 handle that?
It radically reframes it. It keeps the emphasis on speed, dynamism, rapid transformation, but modifies it crucially. It must be joyful and Afro-optimist oriented.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why joyful? How does joy counteract the potential downsides of acceleration?
The implication seems to be that previous attempts at rapid post-colonial change often failed because they were driven by anger, resentment, cynicism, or simply mimicking the top-down speed of authoritarian states. That kind of acceleration can burn out, become brittle, or lead to new oppressions.
So joy acts as a binding agent. It ensures the speed is fueled by positive energy, collaboration, shared purpose, rather than just frantic desperation or negativity.
That seems to be the idea. The transformation itself should be experienced as uplifting, not just necessary drudgery. And the Afro-optimist orientation provides the direction.
Meaning the optimism isn't generic. It's specifically rooted in a belief in the resilience, creativity, and positive future potential springing from African cultures and experiences, challenging those narratives of post-colonial despair.
Exactly. It's acceleration driven by cultural confidence and a belief in self-generated solutions, aiming for that prometopia, Rather than just reacting against the past or waiting for external validation or aid, it uses speed as a tool of sovereign self-determination, fueled by joy and cultural optimism.
Okay, that reframing is critical. Now, this energy needs expression, which leads us to the third point of Opus 2, Flatafro-Theopoetics, Play Soda. This sounds like the artistic and philosophical output.
It seems to be. It fuses those key elements again. Flat suggesting non-hierarchical expression where cultural creation isn't dominated by an elite, but is a communal activity.
So everyone participates, everyone's voice matters in shaping the cultural landscape.
Then, Afro grounding it firmly in the specific cultural context and heritage, reinforcing the non-auto anthropology. And theopoetics suggesting that this creation, whether it's storytelling, music, art, philosophy, is seen as a form of sacred or divine expression. Poetry as a spiritual act.
So the community's art and thinking are decentralized, culturally specific, and spiritually meaningful, constantly reinforcing the core values. What about the term in parentheses, Play Soda?
This is intriguing. It seems to combine play with logos, reason, wisdom, word, and maybe soda, suggesting something effervescent, lively. It implies that this profound theopoetic creation happens through a kind of playful, experimental engagement with knowledge and meaning.
So wisdom isn't just delivered through solemn pronouncements. It can emerge through games, improvisation, communal performance, experimentation.
That seems to be the spirit. It keeps the process of generating meaning and culture dynamic, participatory, and aligned with that joyful aspect of JAOA. It prevents the ontological engineering from becoming a grim, top-down intellectual exercise.
It makes it a living, breathing, played reality. It connects to that idea of immanence play soda, finding the sacred within the playful creative act itself, making spirituality part of everyday life.
Yes, it embeds the sacred in the process, not just the outcome.
Okay, finally, Opus 2 points towards the ultimate goal. Prometotopia of post-coloniality neoculturation,
Right. A prometotopia is a crucial distinction. It's not a static utopia.
which often implies a finished, perfect state which can then only stagnate or decay.
Exactly. A prometotopia, drawing on Prometheus perhaps, suggests a future that is always striving, always becoming, progressively unfolding. It embraces continuous transformation as the ideal, not arrival at a fixed endpoint.
And the process for reaching and sustaining this ever-evolving state is post-coloniality neoculturation.
Yes, it's the deliberate, ongoing, organized cultivation, neoculturation, of new cultural forms, social structures, ways of being that are fundamentally post-colonial, meaning they actively move beyond and subvert the legacies of colonialism, using all the tools from Opus 1 and Opus 2.
So the 8 principles together form the toolkit for building and maintaining this continuously evolving, self-defined, post-colonial reality.
That's the grand vision. It's
Yeah.
the living flat metabolism, achieving its purpose through constant, conscious, culturally rooted evolution.
So we've seen the structure, the grounding, the tools for action, and the ultimate goal. Now we need to look at the core outcome, the main product, if you will, of this entire DT system. It's summarized as exopsychoanalytic form ontological engineering.
This really is the capstone concept, summing up the entire transformative ambition. We've touched on ontological engineering already, the deliberate shaping of reality, of being, of identity.
Not just changing policies, but fundamentally changing how the community perceives itself and the world, escaping that inherited colonial mindset.
Exactly. And the method is described as an exopsychoanalytic form. Let's break that down. Exo means external.
So the shaping force comes from the outside structures, the neuroarchitecture, the hybridized language, the flat social system itself.
That seems right. It's not primarily about internal individual therapy. It's about changing the external environment, linguistic, physical, social, in ways that have deep psychological effects on the entire community. That's the psychoanalytic part, but applied at a collective systemic level.
So the system itself performs a kind of psychoanalysis on the community, restructuring its consciousness by restructuring its world.
That appears to be the claim. The external changes collectively reorganize perception and identity, leading to that new, self-defined ontology free from colonial assumptions. It's a radical idea about how profoundly our environment shapes our inner world.
But maintaining such a radical system, especially one that's decentralized and constantly transforming, must be incredibly difficult. How do you prevent it from collapsing back into familiar hierarchies or losing its way?
DTs anticipates this. It proposes a specific and somewhat paradoxical maintenance system designed to actively cultivate what it calls radical humility.
Okay, and the first mechanism described for this is, well, it's probably the most provocative term in the whole theory.
Yeah.
Reflective panopticon benevolence.
Yes, it definitely stops you in your tracks. The panopticon, classically Foucault's concept, is the ultimate symbol of hierarchical surveillance and internalized control. The watchtower in the center, the prisoners who never know if they're being watched, so they police themselves.
Exactly. It sounds like the opposite of a flat, decentralized system. So how can DT possibly incorporate this idea and pair it with benevolence?
Well, the theory attempts to defang the panopticon, to subvert its hierarchical nature. It does this through those modifiers, reflective and benevolent.
Okay, but still, panopticon. Even if you call it benevolent, isn't the core idea still about pervasive surveillance? Doesn't that inherently create fear or stifle genuine freedom, even if it's supposedly for the collective good? How is that truly flat?
Look, that tension is absolutely there, and the sources seem to embrace it as necessary.
Hmm.
The argument appears to be that the surveillance here isn't centralized, because the system is flat, rhizomatic, polycentric. There is no single watchtower, no hidden big brother.
So, everyone is watching everyone, or everyone is collectively watching the system itself.
More of the latter, it seems, combined with mutual observation. The observation is reflective. It's about collective self-awareness, monitoring the health of the flat metabolism, the homeorhythms. It's driven by feedback loops within the community, not orders from above.
And the benevolence part means the purpose isn't punishment or control for its own sake, but collective well-being, identifying and gently correcting deviations back towards the communal good. Like if someone starts hoarding resources or trying to centralize power.
Precisely. It's framed as a shared responsibility for maintenance. It acknowledges the inherent human tendency for ego and hierarchy to re-emerge, especially in post-colonial contexts where power vacuums can appear. This system is proposed as the only way to actively, constantly counteract that tendency through transparent communal observation focused on collective benefit.
So the gaze isn't from a hidden authority, but from your peers focused on upholding the shared principles. And knowing this happens enforces humility because individual actions are always measured against the collective good.
That seems to be the mechanism. It's a structural enforcement of the idea that the community, the flat metabolism, is more important than individual ambition. It's a potentially uncomfortable idea, this benevolent panopticon, but perhaps seen as necessary to prevent the return of oppressive hierarchies.
A radical solution for a radical problem. Okay, and this is paired with the second maintenance mechanism, eschatological maintenance.
Yes. This complements the panopticon. If the panopticon deals with behavior and internal dynamics, eschatological maintenance deals with direction and purpose.
Eschatology being the study of ultimate ends, final purposes. So maintenance isn't just about fixing daily issues.
It's about constantly checking that every action, every decision, every allocation of resources aligns with the ultimate, long-term transformative vision, the Prometopia.
So if a proposed project offers short-term gain but undermines the flat structure or the flat geonaturalism, eschatological maintenance would flag it as misaligned with the ultimate purpose.
Exactly. It keeps the community focused on the grand vision, the sacred goal. It elevates everyday decisions by measuring them against that ultimate transformative horizon. It prevents the system getting bogged down in short-term pragmatism that might compromise its core principles.
So the reflective panopticon guards against internal threats like ego and hierarchy, while eschatological maintenance guards against external drift or losing sight of the long-term goal.
And both of these paradoxical systems work together with one ultimate aim: nourishing radical humility.
Why is humility, specifically radical humility, positioned as so absolutely essential, not just a nice virtue, but the linchpin holding the whole DT structure together?
Because, the theory implies, the root of hierarchy, domination, and the colonial mindset itself is ego, the assertion of individual or group superiority, the desire to control to accumulate power.
So radical humility is the direct antidote.
It's presented as such. By structurally engineering conditions that constantly discourage individual ego through neuroarchitecture, through flat communication, through the benevolent panopticon, through orientation towards a collective eschatology, the system aims to keep power diffused.
It ensures deference to the collective, to the system itself, perhaps to the ancestral wisdom, to the land, that knee to dust idea again.
Exactly. Power remains lateral, flowing through the rhizome rather than accumulating at peaks. Radical humility isn't just personal conduct. It's the necessary political and structural condition for the flat polycentric homeorhythms to actually function and survive long term. It's engineered service to the collective living flat metabolism. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here, tracing this DT model from its core identity to its deepest maintenance systems.
We really have. We started with that fundamental self-description, a dynamic, adaptive, living, flat metabolism.
We unpacked its complex operational engine, that transversal transjective movement defined by flat-Rizzo polycentric homorhythms. This seems to be the absolute core of how successful decentralized organization is envisioned, particularly in that remote kenema context.
Then we saw how Opus 1 meticulously grounded this structure, rooting it in place and principle, through neuroarchitecture where walls are lungs shaping thought,
Through flat geonaturalism, becoming one wee river with the environment.
through radical unschooling guided by ancestral wisdom, and anchoring it all in Mende cosmology, that crucial knee-to-dust foundation.
And then Opus 2 showed us the tools for outward action for the neoculturation, using language itself as a tool for an ontological engineering insurgency via etymological hybridization.
Driving change with momentum and spirit through joyful, Afro-optimist-oriented accelerationism.
Expressing the soul of the community through flatafrotheopoetics, that sacred play wisdom or play lasota.
All aimed at building that ever-evolving prometopia of post-coloniality. And finally, realizing that this entire, incredibly ambitious structure, this conceptual Kenemagorian mansion,
Is sustained by the constant work of ontological engineering, kept in balance by that challenging pairing of reflective panopticon benevolence and eschatological maintenance.
all designed to nourish the essential ingredient for its survival, radical humility.
You know, the sheer scale of ambition here is just staggering. Using philosophy, cosmology, linguistics, architecture, using them as primary levers for systemic, political, and social change.
It really presents a radical alternative to many standard post-colonial development approaches, which arguably sometimes end up replicating the very hierarchical structures they aim to dismantle.
It suggests that maybe the deepest change has to start at the level of reality construction itself, at the word, at the core concepts of being.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah. The DT model proposes redesigning reality by forging new, hybrid, sacred language and ontological engineering insurgency. So, thinking about your own context, your own challenges, if you were to launch your own neoculturation project, even just conceptually, to break free from an inherited mindset or system that holds you back, what's the single most critical concept, the one inherited word or idea that you would need to radically redefine, hybridize, or maybe even abolish today?
What's the linchpin word currently shaping your reality that needs re-engineering for you to move towards your own version of a prometopia?
Something to definitely mull over.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the DT model.
We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.